You might be a religious scientist.
You might be a religious scientist.
You might be a religious scientist.
If you believe in wholeness.
If you believe in abundance.
That prayer has an effect over our physical world.
If you know that everything that shows up in your life is perfect.
We live in an abundant universe.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Truth Be Told. We have got, this month we're talking about you might be a religious scientist if. So this is our way of kind of exploring the core concepts of the science of mind. So tonight we're going to be talking about prayer, wholeness, abundance. And so why is it important to explore these concepts? Maybe some of these concepts we've heard a lot, and maybe this is the first time you're hearing about this. So the important thing about kind of going back to the basics is in those times of challenges and struggles, and we experience them in life, it's always important to really look at those things that we know to be true, those foundational things that buoy us and steady us, especially in times of challenge. And so these are the concepts of the science of mind that we're going to explore tonight. Some aspects that we can apply to our life, why it's important, and how we can use them in real and practical ways. So sit back and relax. Enjoy another episode of Truth Be Told.
You might be a religious scientist if you believe even the slightest possibility that prayer has an effect over our physical world. So let's read from our core principle number 4 from religious science. Prayer. All good is eternally available and ready to flow into human experience. We activate this flow by means of prayer. Through affirmative prayer or spiritual mind treatment, we increase our consciousness of good eternally flowing to us. So, what this means is saying is that the universe, infinite good, wants to come into our experience. It wants us to choose and create our reality according to our desires. Now, we have within us an internal compass that kind of directs us to where we would want to go. That's where we have desires and likes and preferences. As we follow those, connecting with the ones that make us feel better, that makes people around us feel better, that cause harm to no one, the universe is eager to put that into our reality. Now, you may have heard it said before that all of our thoughts, we're always in a state of prayer, that all of our thoughts are creating our reality around us. And yes, that's true. And it's also, we have to keep in mind that there's lots of other thoughts that are all contributing to our collective consciousness, to our collective reality. So as we get used to the science of mind, as we go back into these core principles to direct how we show up in this life, our job is to remind ourselves that we are part of this bigger thing, that there is this desire for the highest and best experience we could imagine to come into our world. And then we have to expect it. And that's where affirmative prayer comes in. We simply align ourselves. We remind ourselves that there is this bigger thing. And then we remind ourselves that we are that everyone around us is that, everything in our experience is that. And then we express what it is that we are drawing in from that infinite good that wishes to come into our experience. We state that as if it is. And then the next part, maybe the most important part, is gratitude. When we say thank you into this creative mechanism for that which we know is already established in this infinite mind of the universe, when we say thank you, we are saying that we believe this to already be the case, to already be in our reality. And by doing that, we activate this to then show up. And then we let it go. We let this knowing go because it's all in the knowing. Everything begins in mind. So we let it go, just knowing that it is sure to be. And then we get to have the experience of seeing how it shows up. Sometimes it doesn't show up exactly as we wish, as we envision. And that's pretty cool, because often, and really in reality, we may not be able to see it, but it shows up in the best way possible, which works with the all that is. So I know that this infinite good wants to come into our experience, so it's our job to be aware and intentional about our thoughts, about our beliefs, and about what it is that we'd like to see. Keep your focus on what it is you want to draw to you, and don't put so much focus on the things that we would like to not experience. So, infinite good, it's all there for you. We just have to start that ball in motion with intention, rather than living our lives on autopilot, not being aware of the thoughts that we're having.
I like the idea that you talked about expectancy. And it was like a little sneaky little thing in there. But isn't that interesting that like expectancy is like it undergirds everything, like especially like affirmative prayer, when we seek to align ourselves with the truth, which is that's the point of affirmative prayer, is to really focus our attention on that which we know to be true. If expectancy is not part of the mix, then it's just going to be a really flat cake. It's not gonna be what we want it to be, because expectancy is the thing that really amplifies that feeling behind it and that energy behind it. And I think it makes it more than just going through the motions of, oh yeah, I guess I should do a mind treatment around this. But like when you expect it, like that it's already done, then like when you live in that state, then like your whole life is an affirmative prayer, because it's always that expectancy. I guess that's the whole pray without ceasing sort of understanding. I think it's birthed in that expectancy. So I like how you snuck that in there. Very sneaky.
Yeah. I feel like there was just so much nuance that came through so clearly. Like I think affirmative prayer is a really simple thing. It can be a really simple thing. And it often, and at the same time, it often gets really clouded by, I think, a lot of the, like, what I call Bible baggage that so many of us have carried around, like we've carried into this teaching, that when we can kind of put that Bible baggage away and really look at what affirmative prayer is, it gets really simple. And then we like move through this like cycle of like nuance to that, and then it becomes simple again. And so I feel like it got to like it just brushed on so much of that nuance, like the idea like your words have power and we say things and it creates our reality. But also our reality shows up because of this filter that's going on. Mm-hmm. And so there's nuance to like, well, do our words actually create the very thing in front of us? Or is it the filter that creates the thing in front of us? And then like, when we move like to come full cycle again is like, oh, there's no difference. Like that's the thing, like, oh yeah, there's really like not a difference between when we are, it's almost like the prayer is more than for us changing our own mind, like just becoming clear on what it is. I think for me, it has a lot to do with when we realize like the thoughts that we have are not solely ours, right? Like the thoughts that I have are thoughts of the universe. And so when I can get into that space of realizing that, it's like, oh yeah, like there is not a difference between my thoughts, my power to create, and how the universe creates. It's really the same thing. Like there is not a separation in that, right? Oneness, we talked about that a little bit. But there's just so much nuance to that because it's so not clear. Like we think we are these separate beings, you know? And I think you hit perfectly on like those key, like, yes, it is the power in your word, and you know, and the subconscious, and these other pieces. Like, oh yeah, all of that. Cool.
definitely a nuanced thing, and it's all, I want to throw, it's the feeling as well. Words get us into that place of feeling, and it's pretty cool. Like when we do it, and when you feel, you're like, personally, like I have some treatments that, affirmative prayers that are seemingly, like feel more powerful than others. Like it's almost like a switch that goes off that you can feel it, like physically something shift, and
Right.
you're tapping into the good stuff when you're there.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, kind of in a way, it's like, who knows? Like, do we really know how it actually works? I mean, yeah, our thoughts create this physical motion. I mean, there is an immediate and physical reaction in the world around us from our thoughts. So that has to do something. I mean, I feel like there's just layers to. Then our thoughts are changing how we feel. They're changing how our face looks. They're changing how we respond to other people, which changes how other people respond to us, which changes how we feel, and then also there's our thoughts actually going out into subjective mind and literally changing ideas that exist. I mean, so there's so many different levels then beyond just even do my words have power to them.
And even like a physiological level. Like I was just before coming on, I was listening to a podcast where it just talked about these things that literally change the epigenetics, our DNA, what activates in our bodies in relation to certain events, circumstances. And so that certain things get activated in certain ways. But when we change some of these things, then certain other things get activated. Then it just kind of creates these new activation points that literally, their word was arrest the effects of trauma and challenge and all those other things that we've experienced. Like these things literally arrest the response of those things and shift literally how our DNA works. And so it's just amazing that it does have this power, and that it's like one shift within us then shifts you, and then shifts me, and then shifts the next person. It just changes the flow of how we operate in the world. And I think it's in like little ways. I think if we knew exactly how it works, we would so overthink it, or at least these three folks on this call right now would so overthink it, then it would just be a mess. But instead it becomes kind of like breathing and heartbeat. Like thank God we don't have to think about that all the time, or we would be dead if we had to like think, beat, heartbeat, breathe, heartbeat. I mean, we wouldn't last very long. So I think sometimes it's that sort of thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting then to think of it that way, and to think about like what even is affirmative prayer? Like what even is it? Like what are we even doing? And so yeah, like we teach this like formulaic approach to it. But that doesn't mean that's the only way you can pray. You can pray affirmatively, and to some degree, every thought and every word we speak becomes a prayer.
Right.
And at some level, some realm of existence, those prayers are acted on and created immediately, exactly in that way they are spoken or thought, and then that kind of is filtered through that subjective mind kind of thing, right? But it's like. Right. What even is prayer? And when we separate it out from that kind of old school, like praying to the thing in the sky, whatever, to kind of remove all that old idea of prayer, and that just takes a lot of work over and over and over again. But when we do that, it's like, oh, what even is it? What even is prayer? And I think so often there still is so much of that old baggage on it. It's like, what even is, like, isn't it just kind of a conversation with ourselves about what it is that we want or desire, or, I don't know, I just had this image. It's almost like it just becomes like painting. Like we're not really, I don't know. It's just having one of these moments, but it's like, it's almost not even half of what I have tried to make it in the past, because of, if I think prayer is this, then that includes like some sort of, right? If I think prayer is this old idea, it includes some sort of outside thing. And if we remove that, and if we're not separated from the mind that actually does it, that's kind of just like brushstrokes.
Yeah, just
You know,
It goes
Crazy.
deep.
yeah,
good stuff.
good stuff.
You might be a religious scientist if you know that everything that shows up in your life is perfect. Wholeness. We're talking about wholeness. You might be a religious scientist if you believe in wholeness. The real wholeness. Not this idea that everything is one and perfect, and so all of these things that I don't like get cast aside. Not oneness in the sense that everything is perfect, and so everything that doesn't look perfect is not part of the whole, and we cast that aside. But wholeness in the actual sense that spirit, God, life is this transcendent being that includes all perceived opposites. Perceived opposites. Everything that we think of as good or bad and right or wrong. Things that seem like they are in opposition to each other are the parts that make up the whole. And oneness must also include wholeness. Otherwise, we have duality. Oneness can't exclude anything, because then we would have this thing over here and everything unlike it over here. We have two things. And I think that right there is the crux of the whole thing. It's easy to say wholeness and mean duality when we look at wholeness as perfection. Just like when we look at oneness as sameness, wholeness as perfection leaves out anything that looks unlike our human definition, our materialized definition of perfection. So anytime we are bypassing including everything in wholeness, we are bypassing our true perfection in the sense that everything that shows up is divinely perfect. We are bypassing true oneness in the sense that everything needs to be included in order for it to be oneness. And so to embrace this idea that wholeness necessarily includes all of the parts, everything that shows up, then we have this deepening spectrum of wholeness. This spectrum, there we go again with everything becoming a spectrum and fluid. Oneness must essentially and necessarily include wholeness, this idea that everything, all of life, all of creation is part of oneness. It is wholeness, that everything that shows up in front of us are the parts that make up this whole. And this is a brilliant concept that has such layers and depth to it. One that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about wholeness, this idea that everything is for us, everything is not good or bad, everything is, and everything that is moving forward. So everything in life is constantly on this evolving path forward to experience our good with a capital G, our greatness, our divine experience of life. Wholeness includes everything, all of it. And if God is all there is, and God is transcendent and immanent, God shows up through and as all of this life. So even and especially those things that we look at and see as bad, as we see as negative, those things we don't want to express, those things we don't want to feel or experience, all of that is just as whole and complete and perfect and divine as all of those things that we love.
Good stuff.
I love that distinction of that wholeness is not perfection. Like, how many times have we heard, even within our movement, a whole, perfect, and complete? Whole, perfect, and complete.
Yeah.
We are whole, perfect, and complete. And so that's interesting. God, I never even thought about how that can kind of show up a little bit, kind of skewed, because then that means that connotation is that I'm whole and perfect and complete over here, and that stuff is over there, and that is not like this. And so that must be bad, and this is good. And so, yeah, it does create, oh my.
Yeah.
It creates this duality. I like, how many times have I said to myself, like, whole, perfect, and complete? And it's always been in reference to, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. Okay, whole, perfect, and complete. Oh, that's a game changer. It really is. It really is.
I have to say, I've been on this wholeness kick recently, like not on purpose, but just
accidental.
Yeah, like it just keeps showing up all over. I'm like, oh, it's about wholeness. Oh, it's about wholeness, and just this realization of how askewed I think we have understood this concept. By and large, I mean that phrase was the one that kind of sparked this segment, whole, perfect, and complete, because I have to be whole, perfect, and complete, like from this thing that's not somehow insinuating we're not whole, perfect, and complete. And it's weird. It's like I haven't quite figured out, but I think there's some like connection between wholeness and like wholesome that we've tried to take this like Puritan, like you should be wholesome, which is comes across to me as super judgmental, and the idea of wholeness from this judgmental perspective, like somehow we, whoever, we should be complete without needing all this other stuff.
Or whole, not broken. Like this, it's this really.
Yeah. And instead, I think we really need to kind of flip that on its head and say whole meaning pieces.
Like all of it.
All of it. Yeah. Whole meaning we are whole because of the parts. We are the fractions that make up the whole, Well,
it's interesting. I'm doing a talk on Sunday and I was missing a piece, and this is the piece. Because there was a part on wholeness. I'm like, there's got to be something there. Don't worry, I'll give you credit. Ish.
I love this idea, and where it was taking me is we've talked about it a lot lately too. The mask that we put on, like the old ways of being in this world, where that you don't show weakness, you don't, you present yourself to the world, don't let the neighbors see the mess that could be happening in your life. Like, so we deny it to everybody else, even to the point of sometimes denying it to ourselves. And what we're seeing as we're shifting into this new way of being is more people coming out and talking about the mess in their lives, and saying like, hey, I'm going through this thing. I need some patience. I need you to be here with me. And we're learning like it's okay to acknowledge that. And then as one person does, then 5 other people are saying, I've been going through that same thing. I'm so glad you said something. And now it's all coming to the surface to where we get to talk about it, hold that for everyone. And, as we can't, as they say, like what, you can't heal it till you feel it, or, until we acknowledge that something's there, we can't make things better. And stuffing it down and hiding it as if it is something separate from us, or something that we can actually put outside infinity. Like, how can you put anything outside of infinity? There.
And it's a limiting perspective too, because like we were talking about, that there's always something going on and it's always moving forward. So then when we try to bypass these whatever things that we perceive as negative or bad or not our jam, like then it totally bypasses this understanding that everything is moving us forward.
Yeah.
And so I wonder like how many times have we avoided those things, the very thing that could push us forward? And so then we continue in maybe this little cycle when if we were just able to understand this kind of, I'm gonna call it a new idea of wholeness, because it really is, because this is not an idea of wholeness that is often taught. And so it was like wholeness 2.0. But with this understanding, then everything, it doesn't mean that we love everything. It doesn't mean that we're like, oh, yay, trial and tribulation, bring it on. I mean, it's not like that. But it gives us a perspective to recognize that, okay, this is an experience that it's not too great. But what is this, what is the greater sort of thing? What is this moving towards? And I think that's really hard to live that in the moment. It's hard for me to live that in the moment. It usually takes me about a day and a half to really like, oh yeah, that was it. But it'd be interesting if we had this kind of holistic view of our experience where we could see it from like 35,000 feet and say, oh, yeah, we're moving in this direction. And that's why this is. Yeah. But I think the more we're able to change our language around it, I think then that we can change our thoughts around it too. Yeah. And how we see it. So I appreciate the languaging of that, because I think that that's something that's often misunderstood. And so then people feel kind of crappy because, oh, I don't feel really whole, perfect, and complete right now. So it has this very limiting understanding of what wholeness is when you view it that way.
And it's interesting because I think, like you're saying, it actually gets taught, like wholeness somehow, like we don't teach the principle of wholeness, I think, as its own thing. We teach positive thinking, right? I mean, the new thought as a whole,
own issues of that.
Yeah, but I think new thought as a whole, like we don't tend to go into individual like principles or beliefs like this, which I think is so freaking great that we're doing this. I love it. But we tend not to teach specific principles. We tend to teach in like vague generalities, and somehow wholeness gets tied into some of that somewhere along the line. But I think the message that comes across is think positively, and you can change the things you don't like. And, there are feelings that are good and there are feelings that are bad. And God is only love and light and perfection. And so, this whole laundry list of things that fall into like column B of all the bad things somehow get like this shadow cast over them. Like, oh yeah, no, that's not included because that's not a part of God. Yeah. Well, what is it a part of? What else is there? Right. And I mean, this is so strongly taught or encouraged this way that people will kind of stand their ground on it and like, no, those are bad things. That's not God. What is it then?
Yeah.
What else is there?
Right.
And they don't have an answer. I mean, and I'm not trying to call people out. I'm just recognizing how I hesitate to say how poorly it's been taught. That's my judgmental reaction. But I think really in reality, it's how far we've evolved as a civilization, as society, and how slow we are to keep up with that in teachings like this. Yeah. That the principles are the same. The way we teach it needs to continue to evolve.
Yeah. I want to take it even one step kind of further. This is all kind of been like focused on the individual. So let's take it back to the macro. All those people that we disagree with so powerfully, that are exact opposite of what we're doing. Same thing. They're all part of that wholeness. And, it's all part of it. And as we continue to say, we have to change everybody and, make everything to fit my mold, and everybody that doesn't, it's wrong. It's challenging because we do also have a responsibility to protect people. And so how do we do that without condemning part of the whole?
Yeah. That's really it. That's such a complex idea. I actually just gave a talk on this past Sunday. The topic that was given to me was transcend and include, which is straight out of spiral dynamics. And it was really fascinating to take spiral dynamics and merge it with science of mind from this perspective of like transcend in the realm of science of mind. We're not transcending this existence. We're transcending our experience. We're transcending our thoughts, our own perception. And to transcend and include, what's insinuated in that in spiral dynamics is we're moving from this tier 1 level thinking, which essentially says every level in this tier believes that it is right and every other level is wrong. So we're transcending from tier 1 into tier 2, which goes from right or wrong into necessary.
Yeah.
Right. And so no longer are any of the levels in tier 1 right or wrong. They're all necessary. And so all of the belief systems, all of the ways of looking at life, if we can step out of right or wrong and embrace necessary, it's like a whole other ball game, because it leaves room for individual preference. It leaves room for fact. It leaves room for interpretation of experience. It leaves room for things and situations where people don't want to believe in facts, right? I mean, there's room for all of the experiences, and I don't have to make them wrong to recognize that the tension created by the opposition, by the perceived opposition, is what creates the necessity to evolve and move forward. It's that rubbing and brushing, the discomfort that says, we got to do this different. And it makes this evolution. It really forces this evolution to keep going. And, some might say we are behind the ball 10 or 15 years on our last round of evolution in how we are looking at probably needing to do things different. And so that's why it seems, I think, a little more painful this time around.
It's hard to say, when we weren't there before. Like,
yeah,
I definitely posit that we are exactly right on time.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Could be no other thing.
Yeah. But this whole idea of wholeness, I'll just bring it back to something that somebody said before. As I was finding science of mind, a location that followed science of mind teachings, and I also started to find books on Taoism. And so Taoism was kind of my introduction into this new way of thinking, right? From this westernized, Newtonian physics / Christianity into some Eastern philosophy into New Thought, right? And so the thing in Taoism, like the easiest, like as complicated as all of this is, this whole idea of wholeness and life moving forward and all these things being necessary, it's kind of like kayaking or whitewater rafting, or really anything that involves a river. The river is going that way. You have the choice to paddle in any direction you want. But to choose to go that way is you're going to struggle. Yeah. At some point, you're going to struggle, and it's going to get really hard. And eventually, you're either going to have to give up, or the river is going to push you this way anyway. So you can take your time, and we can go back and forth, and we're not necessarily fighting the current. We can take our time and go wherever we want. The river's still moving that way, and the current is still moving us this way. And life moves in a unified direction of evolution, and we have the choice to intentionally go with it or try and fight against it. But it is moving one way. And I just always go back to that, like, oh yeah, yep, we're going that way. That's the way.
Right, don't go anywhere. We're not done yet. We just want to say thank you for watching and remind you the other ways that you can get involved, participate, and deepen your experience of this deeper reality that we like to explore. So if you resonate with this, you want to join us more, come join us on Unwind Wednesdays for meditation. The focus has really been moving into that idea of collective consciousness coming together to experience a new way of being on this planet. And then Thursday nights, this is our favorite thing. This is the most fun for me. Thursday nights, we do the gathering, and that's when we come together. We discuss these topics more in depth, and it's a really good time. It's on Zoom. It's intimate. Come see us, sign up, and check that out. And pretty soon we'll be releasing phase 3, so keep your eyes out for that, and we hope to see you soon. Now let's get back to the show. Thanks for being here.
You might be a religious scientist if you believe in abundance. Now, you may be asking where in the world I am. Well, I am in fact on a paddleboard in the middle of a lake. So what does this have to do with abundance? Well, so this idea of abundance has nothing to do with money or material things, but instead it's this belief, this understanding, this knowing that we live in an abundant universe, that the flow of nature, the flow of our lives, the flow of everything we see is wrapped up in abundance. That there is no lack, there's no limitation, that we exist in this realm of possibilities, that this universe has a capability to maintain us, to sustain us, to be the very giver of life. And so when we look at the natural world around us, we see the literal in living color activation of this idea of abundance. The trees grow toward the light, that the water flows without any idea of limitations or lack. And so that we have everything that we need to maintain and sustain our lives, exist by our very participation in this universal principle of abundance. And so it's not the idea of acquiring things or idea of getting more of, but instead it's understanding that which we already have, that we are infused by the very thing that gives life to everything. This power and presence, this hum of the universe, is the thing that beats our heart, the thing that gives us breath, the thing that gives us life, and it is abundant. It knows nothing else. It exists from nothing else but abundance. So when we can grasp this, when we can grasp just the totality of this understanding, then we can meet life with this amazing expectancy. Expecting our good, knowing that all things are always working for our good. All things are working to reveal that which is already true, and that we are abundant, that we are loved, that we are fueled, maintained, and sustained by the universe itself.
I am so glad to hear a conversation about abundance and not prosperity.
Oh, yes.
Oh, and I know there's probably anyone listening to that's like, what do you mean? But man, if we really follow the thread on the conversation of prosperity, it becomes so toxic so quickly. And yet that is what is talked about in these kind of circles 9 times out of 10 is prosperity. You're a prosperity consciousness. And every time I feel like we just got cut short on this huge idea. And it's like, oh yeah, it's abundance. It's abundance. There's nothing to do with prosperity. It's just a whole other energy.
And that conversation is kind of like, with prosperity, it's like, oh, we've got this. Now we're going to add on to. Well, then that totally negates the belief that there's nothing to add on to. It's already there. The only thing that limits us is our vision of it. Well, I mean, not our literal vision, but that awareness of it. And so I think when the language turns to abundance with this idea of material and money, and that's part of it. But it's more the energy. What is the energy of abundance? The energy of abundance is this. I don't know this. For me, the energy of abundance is almost like contentment. It's just a knowing. It's a contented knowing. It's a knowing that all things are working towards this good. That all things are already there. It's just a knowing. For me, like abundant knowing is just this. It's this idea
Yeah.
that I try to practice.
Whatever the thing is, it's already there. Your needs are already met. It's already available. It already exists. There's more than enough of it. Whereas for me, prosperity has this like taking. There's not enough, and this part's mine.
Yeah. And I understand that the conversation is a little bit challenging because we see the outward manifestation that there are people that do not have enough,
Yeah.
that there are people that that it's not a level playing field in what we see in this kind of external realm. But within the realm of the universe, and that what we know that's below that that's the truth, and it's trying to align that truth with this kind of outward experience. And I think that's the part and the responsibility of us. Well, I'll just say myself, and myself as a person who is following the spiritual path. It's my responsibility to really bring this idea of abundance out from underneath the surface into my experience so that I can impact other people's experience of abundance, because I think that is the responsibility. Once we know that, it's our responsibility to activate our lives in certain ways that promote that for everyone. That kind of social engagement, that social responsibility. I think that's a part of abundance too.
But along those same lines of what we've talked about tonight, of looking at wholeness, that it's not just those good things. Like abundance shows up in the wholeness. So like if you draw back and look at what you have, what you're experiencing, what is going on around you, it all really shows up in abundance. I love how it really all ties together, that even those things that we say, oh, we don't want that's outside of that wholeness, which we know that it can't be. Look at the level that it's there, like whatever is creating that, it's creating it abundantly of as our consciousness is how we're melding with it, what it is that for some reason we are tuned into, our frequency, that all of that for what it is, what that experience is to offer us, it's all showing up abundantly. If we're really focused on drawing that prosperity into our life, it's kind of usually indicative of how much of the opposite of that we're experiencing, that it's all tied together in abundant nature to get us, like you said, rubbing, as it rubs up against us when we're getting closer to those things, that shows us that we are tuning in, that, it's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
When I think this idea, prosperity has this kind of othering flavor to it. Like we're over here being prosperous. Oh, we don't know about you folks. It has that kind of, I wish I was exaggerating.
Yeah, right.
I'm probably downplaying it. But yeah, it has that, has a weird sort of feel to it. But this idea of abundance is this idea that anyone can plug into. And it doesn't necessarily, like you say, have to be money or that sort of thing, but anyone can plug into the feeling of abundance. Yeah. And we know what that feels like. It's that full sort of feeling. It's just that, I don't know. For me, it kind of feels like, laying in the sun. So it's kind of that full, warm sort of like, wow, everything is like just kind of, I don't know, it just has that feel to it. So yeah, prosperity, that sort of idea is a little bit dangerous in the fact that I think it does create this othering, or it creates, oh, if you're not doing it right, that's why you're not prosperous.
Right.
Got to plug in this formula for 1995, and and you will be prosperous.
And you know what, and you will, for as long as you're using the formula. But when that 1995 has used up all of its time and that formula is over, you're back to where you started, because the only reason it worked is because you're putting your attention and focus on this thing. But it's not, prosperity in and of itself is not a principle.
Right.
It's not prosperity is not the way the universe works, right? Like the universe doesn't need you to invest X amount of whatever so you get back that amount of something else, right? Like there's no, that's not the exchange, right? There's no exchange rate for the universe,
And there's no big or small. There's no big or small.
You don't have to like try and bank your rays of sun.
Yeah.
You just go out and stand in the sun.
Right.
And it's kind of interesting, I think, inherent in what we call the prosperity gospel is actually a really big lack consciousness, that as long as we're giving our power away to the money, away to this idea of prosperity, that money and prosperity will always have the power. And so you feel empowered when you have money, and you feel disempowered when you don't have money. And that is very much the way our society is formatted, right? I mean, that's, people with power are the ones, generally speaking, with the money. And there is a huge stigma around that. And I think that definitely carries over into this like spiritual version of prosperity, right? But it's lack-based. The whole thing's lack-based, right? And that's why we see that showing up so much in our society. And I think that's probably why the more this gap between the haves and the have-nots grows, the louder that call gets for doing it different.
Yeah.
Because the prosperity thing really doesn't work. I know we're going, but yeah.
It's like, I don't have it. How can I get it? And so then the energy is, I don't have it. Whatever it is, that could be anything. I mean, it could be job, relationships, house, it could be anything.
And then when you have the opportunity to have it, it's get and take.
How can I get more?
Yeah, right. It's reaching out and taking or getting or either way, whether you have it or you don't, it's all a very lack mentality, which is real different than abundance.
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, it's not an easy, it's not like I've mastered the difference all the time.
No, I still want the next iPhone. I mean,
yeah. We want Chris to have the next iPhone.
Yes.
I'm doing good right now.
Yeah.
I just heard somebody talking today about Simon Sinek, and it was the idea of finite way of being and the infinite way of being, and the old way that we're talking about here is very much that for me to it's all the game, and for me to win, somebody has to lose. If I gain, that means somebody else has to lose, and we're realizing that we are infinite beings in an infinite system, that we don't have to do that anymore, that we can both be in the game and both receive what we need, and there's plenty more of everything for everyone.
Yeah.
Truth.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, we really think about it, it's like, all right, so there might still be some places where the game is so prevalent that we got to figure out how to kind of play along the side or on the sideline. But like there are more and more aspects of life every day where the game, where there are alternatives to the game that we don't have to play, where we can just like bask in this abundance thing and not have to get sucked. Yeah, change the rules, not get sucked into nonsense, which is pretty cool. Awesome. So we are so glad that you have been able to spend this time with us, and we would absolutely like to invite you to Thursday nights if you would like to join in this conversation further, to this deep dive of how this really all plays out in your life, in our lives. Thursday night at the Gathering is where we get to come together and do that. It is an amazing and transformative time. I don't even know that I could try and explain how great it is without just being there and trying it out. There is some sort of magic formula that happens on Thursday nights where we just start this conversation, and an hour later, everybody is really uncovered and shared their soul. It's pretty amazing. Like Chris said a little earlier, very soon we will be rolling out our large group kind of gatherings, which we're really excited about. It's going to be a new way to do large group spiritual community, which is going to be awesome. So keep an eye out for that. And as always, this ministry is supported by people like you and your gifts, whatever you are able to give, if you feel so called to do that. Our fundings are provided by your donations. So if you are able to give in any way, we certainly appreciate it. It supports this mission. It supports us getting this amazing messaging, this amazing teaching out into the world to places where it has never been before, where people have never heard this before. And it gets to bring people together. We really are creating a new earth, a new world, a new way of being. You get to see it here every Tuesday night. We get to talk about it every Thursday, and we are reaching more and more people literally as we speak. Somebody actually just signed up for our email list a minute ago. So if you are able to give in any way, you can certainly do that on our website. The donation link is right at the top of our menu, soulevolutioncollaborative.org. So thank you again. We appreciate it. We would literally just be talking to ourselves if it weren't for you. So we're glad you are here. Glad you could hang out with us and kind of play along. So thank you. And for most of you, we will see you Thursday night. And for everyone else, we will see you next week.